It's October 10th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. The death toll from the conflict has now risen to 1,800 as Israel pummels the Gaza Strip with airstrikes. 192 South Korean nationals have made it back home safely from Israel this morning. And calling Hamas attacks on Israel sheer evil, U.S. President Joe Biden reaffirmed his country's commitment to supporting and aiding Israel. Yemeni rebels warned they'll support Hamas if Washington intervenes in the conflict. And here in South Korea, free flu vaccinations for senior citizens begin today for those aged 75 and up. Health authorities are encouraging people to get both flu and COVID-19 vaccines, which will start on the 19th. The conflict between the Israeli Defense Forces and Palestinian militant group Hamas is intensifying, with the total death toll now soaring to 1,900. Our An Sung-jin starts off this morning.
The death toll in the conflict between Israel and militant group Hamas continues to climb, passing 1,900, with more than 1,000 people killed in Israel, according to the Israel Defense Forces. The Palestinian Ministry of Health stated that at least 900 people were killed in Gaza, including more than 400 children and women. Reports say that a total of 7,000 people have been injured on both sides. Israeli authorities also announced that 2 top officials in politics and economics were also among the dead. The figure jumped as Israel began to pound Gaza with airstrikes in retaliation for a surprise attack on Israel by Hamas on Saturday. And with Israel's leaders continuing to fight on, the death toll is almost certain to rise.
Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it'll take a week, it'll take weeks, or even months. We'll reach all places.
The number of hostages held in Gaza is estimated to be at least 150, including 50 Israeli soldiers.
Israel is committed to the security of its citizens, to their safety and well-being. I would like to emphasize the full responsibility rests on the barbaric murderers of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And therefore, as to the well-being of those abducted and kidnapped, it should be made clear, not a hair on their heads should be harmed. They should be unconditionally released and returned home.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry says that the Israeli military used prohibited white phosphorus munitions, while Hezbollah and Hamas have claimed that they launched attacks from Lebanon into Israeli territory, which landed in open areas or were successfully defended. The death toll in the conflict has reached the highest number in a single year since 2014. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And U.S. President Joe Biden has reaffirmed Washington's support for Israel. However, Iraqi and Yemeni armed groups aligned with Iran have threatened to target U.S. interests with missiles and drones if the U.S. steps in to aid Israel. Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday denounced Hamas' attack as an act of terrorism, reaffirming Washington's full support of Israel in their ongoing armed conflict with the militant group.
So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse.
The remarks come after Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the 3rd time in 4 days, telling the Israeli leader that the U.S. response would be swift, decisive, and overwhelming if it had been attacked in the same way, but noted that democracies must also uphold the rule of law in wartime. Biden also said that he would call on Congress to take urgent action to support Israel. However, Republicans are calling on Biden to refreeze the $6 billion in funds released to Tehran in a prisoner swap deal last month, as more than a dozen GOP senators say the money could be used to fund terrorism. The call to refreeze the funds also come amid speculation of links between Iran and the Hamas attack over the weekend that sparked the armed conflict between Israel and the militant group, despite the U.S. having no smoking gun, proving that Tehran played a direct role. Meanwhile, Yemeni and Iraqi militant groups who have aligned themselves with Iran have threatened to target U.S. interests with missiles and drones if the U.S. intervenes to support Israel in its conflict with Hamas in Gaza. A number of Iraqi militant groups linked with Iran have shown full support for both Hamas and Palestine, while Yemen's Houthi movement made clear its plans if the U.S. gets involved in the conflict. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to visit Israel on Thursday to meet senior Israeli leaders in what Washington says will be a message of solidarity and support. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters Tuesday that Blinken will engage with Israel directly about the situation on the ground and discuss how the U.S. can continue to best support them in their fight. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And some 190 South Korean nationals who are in Israel as the conflict escalated in the region returned home just 2 hours ago. Of the 480 short-term visitors in Israel, 192 arrived at Incheon International Airport via a Korean air flight at around 6:10 a.m. Of the remaining short-term visitors, 27 decided to depart to Jordan by land, while 30 will depart for South Korea on Thursday via Turkish Airlines. South Korea's foreign ministry said that it's assisting in helping the remaining 230 South Korean nationals leave Israel either by land or air. Israel was taken by surprise by an attack by Hamas over the weekend. And some experts say that it is possible that South Korea may have to take a close look at this situation amid growing threats from North Korea. For more, we turn to Mark Barry this morning. It's great to have you back.
Yes, thank you for having me, and good morning.
Mark, would you say there are lessons for South Korea to take from the crisis, especially considering possible threats and provocations from the North?
You know, there are tactical lessons, but I think the most important is that much as Israel and its presence in the Levant of the Middle East, there's quite a bit of similarity to Korea's position, which is that it is bordered not only by North Korea, but bordering the peninsula is Russia and China, and across the Tsushima Straits is Japan. So any conflict, even if it starts out small with provocations that even unintentionally spiral out of control, can bring in the larger powers. In the case of Israel, the very reason that the Gerald Ford carrier group on its maiden voyage is now deployed in the Eastern Mediterranean is to prevent Hezbollah from launching its 150,000 missiles, raining them upon Tel Aviv and northern Israel and Jerusalem. And so similarly, things can spiral out of control in the Korean Peninsula, and this advises utmost caution on behalf of the present ROK government.
Right, and what the South Korean military is saying that North Korea may take the same attack pattern that Hamas did on Israel. And when the inter-Korean military agreement back in 2018 was implemented under the previous Moon Jae-in administration, they said there was no problem detecting threats from the north. And the new defense minister said yesterday that statement was wrong. Now, Mark, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I bemoan the new defense minister's remarks in general, which are seemingly stemming from prior remarks he made before he was confirmed, or his appointment was confirmed by President Yoon. We already know that he did not take a very positive view of the comprehensive military agreement of 2018. But nonetheless, that is an issue that needs to be discussed not only internally within the ROK military, with U.S. Forces Korea and the UN Command in general, and they can come out with a very rational assessment. However, my own opinion as a North Korea analyst is that any action to roll back the CMA of 2018, whether it's a suspension or an abrogation of the agreement, will be an excuse for North Korea to raise or ratchet up the tensions, and everyone will be sorry that that occurred. Furthermore, I would also caution very respectfully to the new defense minister that his comments about lack of certain aerial surveillance by Israel over Gaza is something that did not come from any conversation that he may have had with Israeli Defense Minister Gallant, but is just a conclusion probably of his own ministry and perhaps information he received from the Israeli embassy, and it's not helpful. It's much better to be silent and to be supportive of Israel in a very difficult situation, even though the Israelis themselves recognize that they helped get themselves in this mess due to policies of the current government when it took office in January.
Sure. Then let's say, well, not let's say, he is pushing, the defense minister is pushing for the suspension of the 2018 military agreement. Then why a suspension, not a termination?
Well, from the North Korean point of view, they'll be identical. So to me, it's not a matter of the particular word usage or the nuance. North Koreans don't deal, as you know, in nuance.
Right.
They're very much overt and you know, raising the temperature as high as they can over the smallest thing. So my feeling is that, unfortunately, this, from my vantage point here in the States, is that this looks like it's an issue that's heating up that has more relevance to domestic politics, in particular legislative elections that will be held next March, and less to do with the overall disposition of forces. The most important thing actually to be said is the fortuitousness of the USS Ronald Reagan currently in exercises with Korea and Japan off the coast of Jeju, which will then dock in port on Thursday. And it was not something that was a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was just a fortuitous deployment. But to me, that's the most important thing, to reassure the ROK public and to make sure that the temperatures on the peninsula do not rise. And it's a demonstration of the fact that the United States, in collaboration with its ROK allies, can handle any contingency that may arise on the Korean peninsula.
Then can we say a possible suspension of the deal now depends on future North Korean provocations?
Yes, and there'll be more. And of course, we're expecting a satellite launch to happen this month, and it may or may not be successful. And even they'll claim it's successful when it really wasn't. So it's, in some ways, it's a propaganda war. But the most important thing is to realize that because Kim Jong-un went to Russia last month and met with Putin at the Cosmodrome and toured Air Force bases and munitions factories and so forth, this is a whole new ballgame, because it's a way of showing for North Korea to China that it's not under China's thumb. It has more room for maneuver. And frankly, Putin wants a distraction from Ukraine. He knows that there's a problem right now, and the U.S. supplying munitions to Ukraine. It was not part of the stopgap funding bill that was approved by Congress the other week. And so it's a serious issue, and he would love to see North Korea commit mischief on the peninsula. And he could very well have implied to Kim Jong-un that I'll have your back, even though he probably won't. So this is why the situation must not be clouded and obfuscated with careless remarks. And I just caution everyone to keep cool-headed and keep the alliance relationship as tight as possible, and let actions speak louder than words.
Right. Lots of diplomatic developments are expected this month and also next month. Let's see how that goes. All right, Mark, thank you so much, as always, for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Here in South Korea, free flu vaccinations for senior citizens begin today, starting with those aged 75 and up. People aged between 70 and 74 can get their shots from October 16th, and those ages 65 to 69 from October 19th. Vaccinations will be available until the end of next April. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency is strongly advising seniors to get the flu and COVID-19 shots together. Free COVID-19 vaccines for those 65 and older will be available from October 19th until next March. Those who wish to get both can find the nearest designated hospital or public health care center on the KDCA website. As the use of generative AI becomes more diverse, it's bringing changes in the way we work. But concerns about ethical issues and regulatory measures are also rising. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young spoke with Microsoft's Chief Communications Officer about the rapidly growing generative AI market.
As the race for the development of generative artificial intelligence intensifies, AI has been permeating people's daily lives. Microsoft, one of the leading players in AI market, has integrated its AI assistant Copilot into its products including Windows 11 and MS365 to enhance productivity of complex and cumbersome tasks. A chief communications officer of Microsoft emphasized the importance of thinking about the meaning of the new tool.
One of the less helpful things that has happened is that all this technology, all these tools have been sort of put in this box, and people have put a label on it, and they said it's AI. Mm-hmm. And so people just talk about AI as a thing instead of thinking about it as a set of new tools that have come along. Mm-hmm. And so anytime there's something new, there is a natural concern, like, what does this mean for me? You know, what does it mean for my industry? What does it mean for my country? And especially if it's something as amorphous as AI.
According to market research firm Grandview Research, the global generative AI market is estimated to grow to over $109 billion by 2030 from around $10 billion in 2022. Amid the growing market, South Korea has set AI sector as one of 12 national strategic technologies to focus on and aims to sharpen its competitive edge in AI.
Yeah, I think South Korea is pretty well positioned. It's a country that has really invested in technology over the years, and that has shown it's got great innovation capability. And with AI, the people that will do the best are the ones that adopt early and really drive intensity of use. South Korea is in a pretty good place for those things.
He pointed out education and healthcare sectors as promising industries where AI can be applied.
There's a challenge in that they're trying to enter in the information at the same time as they're talking to you. There's so much research that's happening with medicine right now, and now you have the idea of a co-pilot that can sit there with them and say, okay, here's some new research that you might want to think about as it applies to this specific patient.
Countries across the globe have been seeking ways to mitigate dangers of the emerging technology. Last month, leaders of U.S. tech giants including Microsoft, Google, and Meta gathered and discussed AI regulations with lawmakers in Washington.
If you think about AI as a major new platform shift with lots of new capabilities, and you understand how important technology generally is to the way people live and work today, governments absolutely should be thinking about how will it show up in their market, what are the specific harms that they want to prevent, and we're committed to working with them.
He added that Microsoft has already been contemplating principles around ethical AI use for several years and welcomes cooperation with regulators on this matter. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in northeast Myanmar, where at least 29 people, including children, have been killed in an artillery attack on a refugee camp. The camp is located in a region near the Chinese border controlled by the Kachin Independence Organization, an ethnic insurgent group that has fought for independence for decades. The strike comes against the backdrop of a civil war that has continued since a military coup in 2021. KIO officials say that all victims were civilians and that the strike on late Monday night was launched by the ruling military. The exiled National Unity Government and the British Embassy have also blamed the junta. But the ruling military has denied the accusations and has blamed the deadly explosions on the rebel group's own munitions. Now, Russia has failed in its bid to rejoin the United Nations Human Rights Council. A secret ballot held on Tuesday at the UN General Assembly in New York saw Bulgaria and Albania win the 2 seats in the ballot reserved for Eastern European countries for a 3-year term. That starts on January 1st, 2024. Russia was trying to make a comeback after being booted from the Geneva-based body in April last year, following its invasion of Ukraine. Its failure to rejoin comes amid accusations. Russia got 83 votes, while Bulgaria and Albania got 160 and 123 votes, respectively. Now, a 104-year-old woman from Chicago has died just a week after making a potentially record-breaking skydive. According to a close friend, Dorothy Hoffner was found dead on Monday, local time, at her senior living community. It's thought that she died in her sleep the previous evening. Hoffner's death comes days after she jumped from a plane at 13,500 feet, or 4,100 meters. This to complete a tandem skydive and possibly become the world's oldest person to do so. Her record is still awaiting certification from the Guinness World Records. The current record was set in May last year by Linnea Ingegard Larsson of Sweden, who was 103 years old at the time. And finally, another new record has been set, and this for the world's heaviest pumpkin. The record was broken on Monday at the 50th World Championship Pumpkin Weigh-Off in Half Moon Bay, California. This by a pumpkin nicknamed Michael Jordan that weighs 1,246 kilograms. It smashed the previous record best by 21 kilograms. Now, the pumpkin was grown by Minnesota-based teacher Travis Gienger, who spent around $15,000 to feed and care for it, but now is walking away with $30,000 in winnings and a custom-made ring. Gienger named the pumpkin after famous basketball player Michael Jordan, as it's the year 2023, and Jordan's jersey number was 23.
Good morning. October is a month of change, but also one of the best times of the year for fine weather in Korea. Well, today, not really much to talk about weather-wise, really, as long as you're aware of big temperature differences and morning fog. Ponghwa and Chuncheon are waking up to an almost early winter-like morning, but afternoon highs will rise fast to the 20s. Temperatures will be similar to yesterday here in the capital. If you liked yesterday's conditions, you'll like today's as well under sunny skies. Afternoon highs in most parts will be 23 to 24 degrees Celsius this afternoon with good air quality. An afternoon stroll is highly recommended today. We won't complain much about the weather for the rest of the week. Then rain in central regions and some of the west will bring a chill to the country early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
Welcome. 24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello, I'm Gustav Slamečka, Czech ambassador. Arirang TV is doing its best as a media diplomacy channel representing Korea by delivering current affairs information and news in a balanced voice. Everyone I meet can get news about Korea through Arirang, and we are thankful. I hope Arirang TV will continue to take the lead in delivering Korea's news to the world, and I hope it will be a channel for the world and Korea to synthesize. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
사랑 표현법을 담은 곡입니다.
동시에 느낄 수 있는 곡인데요.
목소리 널 입술
뮤직.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's October 11th here in Seoul. I'm Xin-Yun, and you're watching News Generation, where we discuss the latest issues concerning our generation. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Good morning, Yan.
Good morning. And Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yan.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s and share their own insights. Let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, this Monday was Hangul Day, a national holiday dedicated to celebrating the invention of the Korean alphabet. It's tradition to hang Korean flags, also known as taegukgi, up on the streets to celebrate the day. Instead of doing that, one person decided to burn the flag and post it on social media, claiming that they couldn't stand Korea, seemingly fostering anti-Japanese sentiment. Police have since been trying to track down the author of the post using their IP address, and the current law penalizes anyone who damages or forcibly removes the taegukgi. And moving on to news in China, Beijing is seeing one of the most severe job crises in history. As of June last year, 1 out of 5 Chinese people aged 16 to 24 didn't have a job. This has pushed a lot of youngsters to try out live commerce broadcasts, especially since the pandemic, when many stayed at home with their phones, leading to a surge in demand. But a recent report from the China Performing Industry Association found that while the number of live commerce broadcasters reached 150 million, the majority earned less than $830 per month. And after Hamas's attack on Israel on Saturday, the militant group dragged more than 100 Israeli hostages to Gaza and threatened to execute them. They haven't specifically pointed at how many are held in captivity. Media outlets believe that some foreigners are a part of those held hostage. Now, Hamas said they would execute one civilian hostage every single time Israel launches an airstrike on Gaza without warning. And it's not the first time we've seen a highly flared hostage situation like this between Israel and Hamas, though. Back in 2011, Israel released more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in return for one Israeli soldier who had been held hostage for 5 years. And a similar exchange happened in 2006. So many believe this time around as well, Israel will have to do a similar deal in order to secure the hostages' release. Meanwhile, we're seeing graphic videos on social media with innocent civilians, most who seem to be in our age group, getting dragged onto vehicles and being beaten on the way to Gaza. Now, here in the studio, Chi-hee, have you ever seen these graphic videos capturing the situation over in Israel?
Well, I've read an article on how these sort of videos are going viral online. However, I haven't seen any of them myself because I'm the type of person who gets emotionally affected easily. So at these unstable times, I try not to expose myself too much to these explicit content while remaining alert and aware of the whole situation. I mean, remember back when our country faced that Halloween tragedy, I woke up the next morning not knowing what had happened the night before, and I stumbled upon this explicit video, and it really remained in my head for quite a while. So I was very miserable and depressed for quite some time. So I try not to look at these content too much while staying alert, like I said.
Right, it's very difficult to be seeing raw footage of what's happening there because none of them are really censored that well, and it really resonates with you for a long time. But I do understand that many family members are desperate to be looking at these videos and seeing if their loved ones are there. Have you ever come across these videos?
Of course, yeah. I mean, as a journalist as well, I've seen all possible videos about the situation in Israel, and I've also spoken to many of my friends, both Israeli living in areas of conflict and Palestinian by blood. Now, this tragic situation began with the hostile militant group Hamas launching a surprise missile attack into Israel, as well as murdering and abducting many innocent Israeli civilians at the Supernova Festival and from kibbutz near the Gaza Strip. However, such a large-scale attack, surprise attack, is a highly secret mission that would have come as a shock to the people of Palestine as well. Now that the IDF, the Israeli army, is rightfully launching a full-scale retaliation into the Gaza Strip, thousands more lives are expected to be lost. As justified as it is, regardless of the cause, the sacrifice of innocent civilian lives must be avoided at all costs.
Right, and the situation, it doesn't seem to be getting tamed anytime soon, so we'll have to see any further developments. Until then, that was our news feed for this Wednesday, that is. Let's jump into our main discussion topic of the day now. A common topic of interest among our generation is finding the right job, and that means a lot of things. Not just discovering what you're the best at or seeing what your interests are, it also has to do with finding what type of people you're the most compatible within the workplace.
There's so many memes on social media these days where people complain about their bosses or coworkers. That's how important working with the right people is in order to boost your satisfaction at work. This doesn't seem to be that easy, though. As a matter of fact, a survey conducted by Deloitte on some 23,000 millennials and Gen Z this year found that 6 out of 10 Gen Z felt some type of microaggression at work. Around half of millennials surveyed said they've experienced this too. Of the top 3 ways they felt this microaggression, 2 included conflicts with their superiors.
Because we're seeing a lot of young people, especially new or young employees, struggle to get along with their boss at the workplace, the so-called choose your own boss policy has garnered much attention online. So Chi, could you tell us a little bit more about this policy and where it exactly has been implemented?
Sure. So, well, a Japanese company first implemented this very unique policy.
Okay.
It's called the choose your own boss policy, which enables its employees to literally choose their own boss to work with. Now, the company specializes in structural design, and it has around 100 design staffs. And back in 2019, they implemented this boss selection system, and they have a division of 6 different groups or departments in their company. And according to this system that they implemented years ago, employees are able to choose their own boss out of the 6 selections or options they have every year.
Okay.
And in order to choose their own boss, they refer to this 50-page long manual that they have.
Wow, that's really long.
It is. It's called the Boss Utilization Manual. They refer to it to choose the boss that they want to work with for that whole entire year. And according to the system, so far, 2 bosses have been rejected by their employees and moved to other departments.
Oh, so it is a fascinating policy, but I'm curious as to whether it's really effective.
At least they didn't get let go, you know, at least they kept their jobs. I mean, the policy came into action, as Chi said, when one employee actually in the same Sapporo, a Japan-based company, quit based on the reason that this employee cannot get along with the senior team member. When this policy was implemented, however, it actually lowered the rate of employees leaving the company from around 11% down to 5%. It also boosted the revenue by up to 26% as well. So we see some positive outcomes from the implementation of this policy as well.
Right, and I'm wondering how young people in Korea would be reacting if a similar policy were to be implemented here. So first off, what do you think about it, Xiong, and how does the Korean public react?
I mean, personal experience as well. I mean, Korea also has a very long-standing tradition of a very hierarchical and abusive work culture, which is one of the identifying features of the employment market here. So although it has been improving as time passed, such culture is still prevalent in many sectors, especially small to medium enterprises and a number of large companies as well. So when Koreans were asked the question whether they agree with the choose your own boss policy being implemented, majority responded positively. Let's have a look at the screen. According to a survey by Incruit on a sample size of 767 participants, 86% of all age groups responded that the choose your own boss policy will be positive, whereas 87.2% of millennials and Gen Zs agree to this policy as well. Now, if we move on to the next slide, looking at the reasons why, 22.8% chose less workplace abuse, followed by the promotion of a more horizontal work culture at 19.7% and an increase in work efficiency at 18.8%. I mean, as you asked, I do wholeheartedly agree with this. I mean, of course, we might have a number of the oddball Gen Zs as newbies joining the company, which might hinder the credibility of their boss choices.
Right.
You know, they might be doing it on purpose or just personal vengeance, who knows. But from my experience, there's nothing worse than an incompetent senior management for the company's operation.
I see.
So as long as you can actually ensure that the boss itself, the senior management, is doing a good job the company will actually benefit from this policy.
If you work with a good boss, like better productivity.
100%.
Now, what about you, Ji? Where do you stand?
Well, as Xiang explained, the majority of the younger generation are positive towards this unique policy because often the trouble at workplaces come from working with their bosses or colleagues. But then some argue that it could, in fact, deteriorate the divisive corporate culture, this whole system, because some argue that it's not reasonable or even inappropriate to choose your team leader or boss based on their social popularity, because it could be very rare for them to choose based on the actual standards or criteria. They would want to work with someone they're close to or who are socially more popular, for instance. So there are some people who are arguing against the whole system.
Just because they don't want it to be like a popularity vote. It should be based on actual skill sets. And speaking of skill sets, I want to find out what type of boss you guys would rather work with. So I have a would you rather game, and I'm going to give you two options to choose from. And the first question is, would you rather work with someone who's really warm-hearted and generous, but isn't the best at the job, or a boss who's really skilled at the workplace, but doesn't have the best personality traits from you?
For me, definitely the latter.
Okay, why?
I mean, if I wanted to hang out with someone who's generous and warm-hearted, I'll probably do it in my own time. In a workplace, you're there for work, and as soon as you look for comfort at work, I mean, in my opinion, you do become an unreliable asset to your team and the company.
Right.
You know, you'll be lounging around, seeing which is the most comforting situation, how you can get off from doing less work, you know, just hanging out with the co-workers and things like that, which will not be a good outcome.
Okay, so Xiong chose the latter option. What about you, Jihi?
I wish I had a different opinion, but I have the same opinion, and I agree with Xiong because yes, when it comes to choosing my boss, I would want someone who has better skill sets rather than personality, because I would expect a boss to be able to guide me throughout my work, and I want to be able to learn from them as well. But when it comes to choosing my colleagues, though, I would want better personality people than people with exceptional work skills. Because as colleagues, we can support each other, you know, teach each other, and we can learn and grow together. So I think it's a different story.
I mean, the perfect scenario would be a really warm boss with great skill sets.
Exactly, yeah.
But that
very rare. But I guess that's some of the bosses we have.
Okay, hopefully, yeah. Now, would you rather work with a boss that loves gathering the team together and frequently buys meals for you and your teammates, but requires you to spend time outside of your work, like personal time? Or would you rather a boss that never calls you, doesn't really care about your birthday or like your personal life, but never calls for these?
You'd get really upset if nobody remembers your birthday.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would answer as well. But a boss that never calls you past work hours or hardly knows anything about your personal work life, which one would you prefer?
So now, ideally speaking, as you just mentioned as part of the answer for the previous question, if the boss who is called during work hours, but they do very good work at his or her job station and also turns generous and warm-hearted afterwards and loves to boost the team spirit through company meals and drinks, that would actually be a match made in heaven. You know? It would. Both private and public workspaces as well. I mean, however, it is quite commonplace in Korea for your bosses or senior management in Korea to not know anything personal about you, you know. With the current Gen Zs, it is actually thought to be quite a courteous thing to do for the bosses to not really ask any questions about your personal life and stay away from it as much as possible.
Right.
And when I worked in offices before, companies before, it was the case. And I really had to put more personal work in to make them get, personally acquainted, know things about them as well.
Right, and I asked this question because we had an episode where we talked about millennials and Gen Z not really liking company get-togethers, but where do you stand on that?
Well, like you said, most millennials, as we deep dived into the topic in our previous episode, most of them believe that individual time is more important, but then I have my own reasons to prefer bosses who would prefer to buy meals outside of the office time, because if we are having more meals outside the office, we can create better bonds, and that means we can talk about work more comfortably. And even if we are not able to make it for that team event, we can comfortably tell the boss or your colleagues more easily because of that personal bond that you've built amongst each other.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we have a young, successful Korean woman, Jihi, who's made it up the ladder very quickly as well. Getting acquainted with the bosses, personal relationships.
Spending time outside of work for those company get-togethers. But anyways, we asked our viewers to answer a very similar question. We asked them to list a few traits they would like to see in their boss, or if they're at a senior level position, what they're looking for in their employees or subordinates. Here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Hannah said top-tier supervisors are always open to their team's ideas and suggestions. In employees, I value problem-solving abilities and a strong sense of responsibility. SM1354 said empathy is a skill that isn't recruited for, but is essential to keep employees happy. Tears Bell said my preferred boss would be a person who understands the needs of their employees and recognizes that we are humans, not machines, which is also a great point. Now we're going to include an expert in our talks to see what he has to say on our discussion topic. We'll include him in our talks right after this. We're going to include an expert in our talks now. It's Dr. Marlin Tman, Assistant Professor of Communication at the University of Southern California, who will be providing his own analysis as to what causes conflicts in the workplace and whether this choose your own boss policy is the best way to go. So welcome, Dr. Tman.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to join the convo.
All right, the first question I'd like to ask is the root of the problem. What would you say is the main reason why young employees, or new employees that is, and superiors or senior employers have conflicts at the workplace?
So it's hard to say for the main reason, but I would actually say there are a couple things that immediately come to mind. One has to do with the difference in training. So as we all know, as the world has progressed, the fields have gotten more complicated, more advanced, task work has gotten more complex. The kind of training you're expected to have when you enter into an organization now is just different than those who have been there for a while. And that can lead to just differences of opinions, views on how work and how specific tasks could be done. The next actually dovetails nicely to the conversation that you all were just having about working with people who may be more or less skilled than you. So how do you communicate with people who maybe don't quite understand your specific task work, but it affects their work, right? It affects their activities. How can you bridge misunderstandings when you may not necessarily use the same vocabulary? And so there's a number of things that, again, are even just like task focused that can lead to conflict. And I would say that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's before we even broach into, interpersonal personality issues and negative behaviors at work.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it almost sounds like a natural process to be happening where you see a generation change. And Dr. Tman, we've been actually, for us, we represent a lot of the millennials and Gen Z's point of view, and we've been doing that as employees' point of view as well. But could you talk to us more from an employer or a superior's point of view? What type of junior or employees do bosses actually want to work with?
Absolutely. So what I see a lot in my profession, we have the opportunity to work with many early stage people right before they go into their dream jobs in a lot of cases. Right. And I would say 2 things that we really not struggle with, but things that we have to end up coaching are, one, whether or not we want to have a culture or climate that's centered around task execution versus one that may be centered around more collaborative developmental work. And let me explain each one very briefly. When we're talking about task execution, we need to help newer, younger employees really learn how to hit deadlines, how to commit, and really just like work to accomplish and complete something. Now, the learning outcomes associated there may be limited. They may already have the skills they need. They may have already done this work before, but task execution helps these people be prepared to just go to work. The other one, with the more collaborative learning kind of environment, more generative, I would say, that helps people really get in a mindset, I would say, of more growth oriented, because no one really wants to stay in the same role forever. with that being like the first thing you try, right? So of course, mid-career, you really have figured out, I like a little bit more management, but mostly like task kind of work, or I like dealing with people. We figure that out over time. And so I think for the newer employees, being in environments that are collaborative, give you space to contribute, test your boundaries, explore, really build your skill set, can serve a lot of people.
Well, Professor, is there any real-life episode where a company implemented a policy to alleviate this conflict between supervisor and subordinate? And also, very briefly, are you for or against this particular choose-your-own boss policy?
That's a good question.
I'm against it. 100% against it. Well, the reason why, all joking, I've done a lot of research on the idea of self-managing teams or self-assembling teams where people have agency and they can control who they're working with. And one big assumption that we're making here is that people know what's good for them today as well as what will be good for them a decade from now. And so I definitely do respect the benefits that Choose Your Own Boss brings, particularly when we're talking about organizations that have unhealthy climates or cultures for a lot of their employees. However, there could be something to be said about learning how to work with different types of people and also being able to work in other conditions that may not necessarily have been something you prepared for or trained for, and being able to adapt. And so that's where my response is really rooted. I think in your early career, we have not yet been exposed to the plethora of management styles nor working kind of conditions. And so what I think is good for me today may be true, but it may leave me very ill prepared for a promotion or for my next organization. And so again, just taking that growth mindset, that learning mindset, I would say adapt, understand where you are. And unfortunately, that's not always going to be positive. And I'm not saying stick in conditions or environments that don't work, but treat it as a learning experience and then figure out next strategy.
Right, Dr. Twyman, as you mentioned, I think it is very important for us to understand that there's always that bigger picture. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Thank you all for the conversation.
All right, and before I let you guys go, could you guys give me any suggestions as we millennials and Gen Z employees can make at the workplace to avoid or prevent any work-related conflicts from coming forth?
Yeah, I mean, as we like to say in Korea, everything is case by case. You know, it's not always the senior staff member who causes the issues, and there must be a set of rules and guidelines upheld by the management, as Dr. Twyman said. So there is at least a basic level of order in workplaces. And I think that is why a lot of Korean workplaces these days try to keep a minimal, almost impersonal relationship with co-workers unless you really get along with them. I mean, if this is going to continue, I think policies such as flexible work hours or freedom to work out of office could be a good idea. And I do actually agree with Dr. Twyman saying that Choose Your Own Boss policy would be a bad idea because it destroys an organization. It really makes sure that everybody wants to do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And, you know, you never know, case by case, I said, you never know if it's going to be a positive impact or a negative one. So, I mean, whilst doing these policies, flexible work hours, out of work, office working things, it will make sure that mandatory schedules, everybody shows up and has the employees actually have complete responsibility.
Right. Chihi, where do you stand?
Listen to the working level, who's mostly millennials and Gen Z, to improve productivity and work satisfaction.
That's very good. All right. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang.
My pleasure.
And Chihi.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arirang TV is conducting a quality and satisfaction evaluation to enhance the broadcast service for viewers worldwide. Please visit our website www.arirang.com to provide your honest opinions. Participants will be entered into a draw for a chance to win prizes. 2023 Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.